Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Reviews. We are continuing our review series on the Rocky franchise, and as you can see from the top, Rocky 3. We have entered the fun 80s ones now. Next week's going to be the big one, but Rocky 3 is still an absolute powerhouse in the Rocky franchise, and we're going to be discussing it all tonight. It is kind of a review, but if you followed the retro reviews we've done before, it is really just like a general discussion, general chat about films that we love that maybe we haven't talked about on the channel before or only referenced a little bit. And this is giving us the opportunity to go back to some of these older films, these older, bigger franchises, and finally get reviews and discussions out there. Last week when we did Rocky 2 was fantastic. We had comments going left, right, and center. Like behind the scenes trivia that even I wasn't aware of or you wasn't aware of. It was great. So as we go through this, please do comment along and get involved in the discussion as well, because yes, we're chatting, but you guys can also get involved as well, and we really want you to do that. We had a lot of fun with last week's one, and we're hoping that this one's just as good as last week too.
Absolutely. So as Chris said, get commenting, guys. And the best way to help us to find new Rocky fans, we had some new people come in last week, is to like our videos, to comment along with them, and to share it. If you guys know Rocky fans, if you're dropping Rocky facts, then why not share with other people that want to join in, especially when we're building up towards something special, which is next week, Rocky 4. And of course, the best way to find out when we're going live is obviously subscribe to us, get the notifications on. You'll get the alarm every time we go on. But if you don't know that, if it is last minute, check us out on Facebook, Cinema Savvy, and Twitter at cinema_savvy. We've also got a link to the TeePublic in the merch below. Sorry, I said that wrong. link to TeePublic in the description below. You can't get a merch, but you can get it on TeePublic. And we're going to quickly see it once more, the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special. We're doing a watch-along. It's out on Disney Plus today. Me and Chris will be doing a watch-along at this time tomorrow, 10 p.m. GMT. We'll be doing a Disney group watch together. We'll invite people in if you guys want to join in. It's a combination of a review, a reaction, and a first-time watch. So we're ticking off all the boundaries there. So we're looking forward to that if you guys are into your Lego or into your Star Wars or just something a little bit different. But we are here tonight to obviously talk Rocky 3.
When the Lego Holiday Special came out today, we were like, do we do a watch along tonight? It was like, we can't move Rocky. We've got to keep that 10 p.m. Tuesday every single week for Rocky and see it through till the end. So that'll be tomorrow. I've been looking forward to this one. When we decided that we were going to do Rocky, when we discussed that, behind the scenes, when we were gearing up the idea for retro reviews on the channel, and I always get that feeling whenever I watch the Rocky films and I start at Rocky 1, I'm like, let's just get to Rocky 3. Not to say that I dislike Rocky 1 or 2, I absolutely love them, but the big thing to talk about with this one is the complete tonal change that we get with this. And I watched this film this morning, and watching them in succession every week, you really do see that really interesting progression that the Rocky franchise takes. Not a bad one. I guess some people, if they like the more drama-focused stuff, don't worry, because by the time you get to like Rocky 6, it's going to circle back around and get to the stuff you love. I love all of this stuff, everything from the more serious drama, character-driven side to it, to the completely ridiculous 80s gem that this is. So this is 1982. We, just the early parts of the 80s, we hadn't quite got steeped into it as we do with Rocky 4, which we'll be talking about next week. My first impressions from this, like the first time that I watched it, this is going to be a broken record. I think I mentioned this last week. Whenever I ended up watching Rocky 1, I think it was just like a marathon on the TV. They probably would have screened these like one every week or something like that. So I would have watched it, very similar to how we're doing with these reviews, actually. And I remember distinctly, by the time Rocky 3 happened, I'm a big 80s movie fan. So, and like Stallone fan, even before this point, from Rambo and all the other countless films that he's done. Which was interesting that I was a Stallone fan before I actually watched the Rocky films, but I remember distinctly getting to this one. And not only do you have that, but you have Mr. T, you have Eye of the Tiger. This is, I think when you think of Rocky, some people might think of the original one, you remember the stair run and everything like that, but definitely in terms of soundtrack, I think, and we'll be talking about the music later, Eye of the Tiger is such a distinct identity with Rocky. I think when I got to this one, this is where I was like, this is cemented now as a series that I'm invested in, that I love. I love these characters, and I love the episodic feel to them as they go through. It's just great. I love Rocky 3. I will grant you that it's not probably as well written or as, emotionally investing, perhaps. There are moments that still do have that heart to it, but this is just a completely different animal from the previous two.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into first time watching because it was the succession. What I will say is, for many years, Eye of the Tiger is probably one of the best known songs in history for whatever reason. It's that ultimate classic that deserves a classic. I did not know for years that was made for Rocky 3. Probably only knew that in the last sort of 6-7 years. I just thought, oh, look, Rocky's playing Eye of the Tiger. Of course they would. It's a great sort of song. And you didn't realize the impact that actually had. So I think that's something that I'm always going to talk about. But as you said, now it's become this really fun weekly thing. Like I sat down on Sunday night to watch this and check the run times at 1 hour 40. I can sneak it in. It's going to be good fun watching this. And oh, wow. It's the change we notice. And I think better than it's kind of feels episodic like TV. Like I don't watch The Crown, but obviously The Crown's come out and it's like here's six decades of the Queen, and it's across 6 seasons, and now it's like here's 6 weeks of Rocky, and we're going to go from that Rocky one through to Balboa, and it's like the evolution of Sly, the evolution of Rocky, and it feels incredible in that sense. And it's crazy how much more stuff in it. Even as you mentioned, Mr. T. This film proudly says in the credits, introducing Mr. T. Did a check. I think this is his second film, but they come out the same year, so I'm guessing he maybe filmed this one first.
Yeah,
but this is that momentum change of everything changes. You had the ending at 2, and you know what? Off the bat, the time change works. That you have him defend the title 10 times. It doesn't pick up straight after. You don't get this. I'm the champion. Apollo wants a rematch. Well, we do, but in a different way. But it just jumps forwards. And you know what? I thought that's really bizarre, but it works. It makes sense because you can't introduce someone like Clubber Lang without getting into it at the moment. Can't introduce that without having him set up as this great champion already. So I thought Sly to be a bit smarter with how he did it, and I think he did it to a point, which obviously does have that craziness that we adore with the franchise. But as far as it goes, you know, you mentioned it's very 80s as well. It's 1982. It's the first Rocky film of that decade, and it's remarkable. I think that's maybe a polite way of saying it. It's so 80s, even to the point of having Hulk Hogan in later on, who we'll get to as well. It felt 80s, but it's so early in the 80s. It's kind of setting the standard for the decade. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, if that was 1982, you know, all the stuff that came after that we all know nowadays, we did not know that. Like Rocky had a big say in all of that. So yeah, sort of initial thoughts was it was really fun to go back and revisit. And as I said, I loved watching Rocky 1, loved watching Rocky 2, but Rocky 3 was that, okay, it's not 2 hours plus. I'm not lying down here concentrating extremely. I'm just sitting back and having a laugh with this. And you sent me some really funny videos this morning. It was just almost like the Clubber Lang greatest hits. Oh yeah, I'm going to pass it back over to you because I'm going to end up waffling for too long.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, these we do kind of have a structure, but as I say, these are just open discussions. You mentioned it was the film debut of Mr. T, which actually I wasn't aware of. I thought he'd done 18 way before this. So I have never seen 18, but I guess I got my ears crossed. I guess that took place later on in the 80s once he'd been established with this one. But it's also the film debut of Hulk Hogan as well. Now he was probably obviously doing his thing, doing what Hulk Hogan does, but in terms of films, this was his first one as well. So it's kind of an interesting amalgamation, and I know I'm jumping ahead in the schedule here because I said we'd talk about the music later, but it is the beginning of the film, and I did want to talk about that opening montage as well because I think it's a very smart way to open the film. We do have more montages to come later, but you open with one. It has been 3 years since the previous one, and it is just cementing that career of Rocky as he is the world heavyweight champion, is defending his title. We later find out by Mick that he was basically just giving him, you know, they were hand-picked fights just to keep him safe and to keep him at that level, which we know does exist. We see boxing matches now where you think, oh, well, there's no contest in that at all. They're not being challenged. And we open with the powerhouse song. No matter how many times I listen to this song, Eye of the Tiger is fucking incredible. I love Survivor. They're one of my favorite bands. And this was their original, I think this was their original singer, Dave Bickler, who did the singing to this one. It's great, and it crops up so many times throughout the film. You get it in the opening, you get it in the closing, and you get a instrumental throughout the montages. It is the perfect song to get you amped up. And actually, I found this out before we. I knew rumors of it. I couldn't remember if it was this movie or Rocky 4. The song "You're the Best" from Karate Kid. I know there was that dispute on under Battle of the Brackets last time by Joe Esposito. You're the best around. That another classic montage song from another sports film that was written for this film, but Sylvester Stallone said it wasn't quite as good as Eye of the Tiger, which for this film, I can't. Maybe that's just history. Maybe that's just 80s film history now, where I have tied Eye of the Tiger to this film. I have tied You're the Best to Karate Kid, and I can't see either of them being switched into either film. So that was turned down in favor of Eye of the Tiger. And then it's kind of funny that that movie gets put into another sports film, also directed by the original director of Rocky. And Survivor would also write a song and be the end credit song of Karate Kid as well. So it's kind of this weird link with all of them together. And I think when we get to Rocky IV, I know that a lot of music was written for that was distributed to different 80s films, which maybe we'll talk about on future retro reviews. But no, I do love that opening montage, and it does kind of get you into it. And it's the perfect song to get you amped up for the film that's to come. Yeah, no, absolutely love it. But moving into Rocky, I did notice a change that I hadn't really noticed before with this in terms of how Stallone plays it. I don't know if you picked up on that. He doesn't feel like the same Rocky from the first two, just in how he talks, how he carries himself.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was sort of a shift in Stallone's acting as he was becoming bigger maybe and breaking away from that sort of start out role he did with Rocky, or if it was just going for some kind of character growth from the 3 years that he has been champion. That probably would change someone and how they act and carry themselves.
Yeah, and it's kind of, when I was thinking about it, I thought back to when we did the last episode, when I kind of said that I wonder if it reflects Stallone's career at the time. He had Rocky 1, which was this tremendous hit that made him who he is. Then he had Rocky 2, which was the follow-up, and he had to be that same guy, but it sort of demonstrated how it changed his personal life. And I said, is that both Stallone and Rocky? And again, it's the same. You get to this 80s point and Stallone is bigger and bigger and bigger, and I, again, can see it's that self-assurance. I think it's probably the best actual way of saying it. He's far more self-assured. He's a bit cockier around Adrian. He's refusing to acknowledge that, he's won all these fights. He's the champion, obviously, we'll get to it, but he's obviously distraught what he learns about the fights were picked for him. And I think credit to Stallone, because if you bring in someone and these films need to be tailored around the villain. I know, obviously, Creed's about Rocky and Adonis Creed, but certainly in these Rocky films, the villain has to compensate Rocky's personal life, where he's at. And to bring in Clubber like, the brute, the guy that had the crap upbringing, and you need that mirror comparison. If Rocky's got this rubbish upbringing still, if Rocky's at the bottom trying to get to the top, it wouldn't work. So you need to put Rocky in this situation where, he's confident, he's a champion, he's now got a mansion, he's comfortable. We'll obviously delve into that later in the story arc with going back to roots and whatnot, but I thought that was a really good way to do it, because again, if Rocky doesn't work, Clubber Lang doesn't work. If Clubber Lang doesn't work, then Rocky can't work, and they go hand in hand with one another. And that's why I was surprised at how many years longer it took me for me to realize how great Clubber Lang is a villain, because it was always the one of Mr. T. Not anymore. Now it's the Clubber Lang one. Don't know what changed. Age, I don't know, but there's just something about watching this where I just had such a good time watching, and the
runtime as well, as you mentioned earlier, like 95 minutes. It's a really easy sit, breezes through it. It knows exactly what it is. It doesn't try and be anything more than it is. And we mentioned that it was kind of building to this. It has now become about the boxing. It is who's this new theatrical, almost like Bond villain opponent that we've got to go up against, get the training done, go through some hardships before we get to it, and then we beat the bad guy at the end. That's kind of the formula for the next 3 Rocky films, I would say. Rocky V does some different things, but certainly this and the next one. It's that perfect pairing. I can't remember who commented. It was either Carl or Hennick last time, that 1 and 2 are like the perfect package together, good double feature. 3 and 4 are, 5's kind of whatever. We'll get onto 5, and then you get onto like the more dramatic ones. So no, it's the perfect blend. And what I do find about with this one, though, well, really all the Rocky films, this kind of started with Rocky 2. I forgot to mention this last week. As each film goes by, he gets some kind of ailment or injury. I feel like every single Rocky movie, as it goes through, he says that he's going to retire, and he never retires. Rocky 1, he had the really bad eye injury, and it was like you could go blind. That never comes back up again. And in this one, he starts off, he's like, I'm officially retired, and then he's fighting again, and then I think something happens at the beginning of, I can't remember. In every movie, it feels like he's retiring, and he never quite does it. Even to the point where he's like, what was he, in his 60s in Rocky Balboa or whatever, when he fights again. It's just kind of funny how that happens. But I wanted to talk about Adrian, because I was going to come on this review tonight. This was before I watched the film. I thought Adrian, I love the character of Adrian. Absolute power couple in cinema history. I will always say that, easily in my top 3. I've never thought she's been the most supportive of spouses. In every single Rocky movie, it feels like she's the naysayer. Like, you can't do this, Rocky. Don't fight, Rocky. I don't want you to do this. You're going to get injured. It's like, thanks for the support, lady. And I thought she did the same in this one, but watching it again, she's really supportive of him in this one. One of my favorite scenes in the film, and there isn't much heart to this film. There's a few scenes. We'll get onto the big dramatic one in a minute. That conversation she has with him on the beach. I love that scene. It's a great moment between the two of them. So yeah, I kind of had a shift with Adrian on this one. I was like, okay, she does have her moments. I love Adrian, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not harping on her, but I must have remembered the film differently, but then rewatching it today, I realized that, probably out of all the films, this one's the one where she's probably the most supportive.
Yeah, and I think that was what I picked up on. That I started thinking that she doesn't have much to do in this film, and that was me watching. I think when the shift momentum goes from drama to boxing film, ultimately, Adrian does need to take a backseat, politely put, because it needs to be about the boxing, because the forefront of what they want to do has changed. However, it's as you said, you get the scene on the beach, you get these little bits here in between, and ultimately they do use it. Granted, it's maybe to sort of progress the fight. When he said my favorite scene, I was expecting "Hey, woman" to be said. Obviously, we get to that shortly. But yeah, it was really interesting because she's got less to do, but then she also has one of the, I wouldn't say it's my favorite scene, but on paper it's maybe one of the best scenes. It's that beach moment, and it needs to come from her, and you still get these lovely little moments between her and Rocky, like when she goes, "Oh, we never got to go on honeymoon together, did we?" And even though they're in this like horrible place, like you still feel like they know their roots, they both know where they've come from, and I think that's a really cool way to approach it.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I guess there's another. I mean, Hennick's actually just brought it up there. That Sylvester Stallone revealed that his body fat was a remarkably low 2.8% during the shooting. I just wanted to talk about this because there is a legitimate physical transformation in Stallone in this movie as well. Not only just the tonal shift, but physically. And I had to check when this came out in relation to the first Rambo movie, First Blood. Because in my mind, his body type in First Blood was more like the natural, still muscular, but like the natural look that he had in like the first two Rocky films. This was actually the same year, so I think this was released in I want to say the summer of '82, and First Blood was released December 16th, 1982. Because nothing says the Christmas and the holiday season more than Stallone in First Blood, right? I guess, but I would say, I don't know, but I think he was definitely hitting the juice. I think this is where he discovered it, and certainly when we get to Rocky IV, my God. But I looked at his training, actually, and not to take away from the hard work that he did, but the physical training for this film, if it's true, this is what Stallone said. He would start the morning with a 2-mile run. In terms of his daily diet, he was on 10 egg whites a day and a piece of toast. That was it. And then every third day, he would have a piece of fruit. He'd then do a 2-hour weight session, have a nap, do a 18-round sparring session, followed by another hour of weight training. And then there was something else at the end of the day as well. I'm like, that is mad. That is absolutely mad. That is to get as shredded as he was for this film. So absolutely fair play to him for having that dedication, because Lord knows I couldn't do it. But you see him in this movie, even the hair, like, my God, the hair is like a character in and of itself. Like, we talked about this before a few days ago, where it's this it's almost like an afro. He's almost competing with Apollo Creed in this film, and it's all in one piece, and it's amazing. But yeah, he is completely different in this film, and I think this image of Stallone is probably the one that people have the most. It's that early to mid 80s action hero, completely shredded out of his mind. Yeah, I think that kind of goes with like the image change of the Rocky films as well.
Yeah, and I feel that the transformation happens within the film, because you have the first fight, it looks like Rocky, but whether it was camera trickery and how they wanted to shoot it, but the reveal in the second fight, sorry, not as in the against Clubber Lang for the finale, when I saw his body, I was like, whoa, have I missed something, or has he changed throughout filming? And I think there's got to be a bit of that too. Maybe I'm in the wrong. Someone can tell me that. But I felt that if it looked like, when you get these films, I think, what's his name? Ben Affleck's one of the best examples in history, where when he got the role of Batman during Gone Girl filming, and he got so ripped so quick, they had to change his costumes. But you can see Ben Affleck in some scenes, they go into another Batman, Christian Bale. His first scene in Dark Knight, that's towards the end of filming because he started to drop the weight for his role in The Fighter the next year. So he's got the really weird chin, thinner arms and stuff. And I felt that Stallone has that transformation. I think it's evident, and it's how you say the physicality he had to do for this, and it's that prime. It's the 80s. He's become this global name. Here's the action star. Granted, we don't have the Expendables yet, but again, the 80s is kicking off. And when you think of 80s action films, it is Stallone, it is Schwarzenegger, it is all of them that went on to do Bruce Willis as well. You think of the whole gang, and it's great that he goes back to his roots because Rocky, although it's boxing, you can even look at it from a sense of it's not an action film, but he's took it from drama to action. He's switched it up as much as he can, and yet he's still choosing to direct this. And also talking action, he doesn't go for maybe not to be rude on Carl Weathers, he's an absolute unit in these films. And obviously, I think he did American football at college, didn't he, before he did acting? But to bring in Mr. T, an unknown, again, I didn't know this was I did not realize how ripped he was. Maybe it's an age thing. Like for people our age, growing up, it was the Snickers adverts, but you knew Mr. T because of the catchphrases. Whereas this is him. This was the origin. This was the first time that he'd started doing catchphrases, and it's crazy to think that Rocky did that because you wouldn't think that one man would become who he did because of this one film. I know that's a ridiculous concept to say, but I felt that more than ever watching him. Was like he basically just pretended to be Clubber Lang for the following 40 years. And I think that's a really big part that comes in it. You can't have Rocky's beatdown and return to be a better champion without the physicality needed to change as well as it mentally.
Yeah, I think we should talk about Clubber Lang because he is the antagonist for this, and it needed to be big. It needed to be someone big. And apparently they were looking at 2 real-life heavyweight champions. I think the 2 names were Joe Frazier and, just checking here, Ernie Shavers, which would be weird because as far as I remember, didn't Joe Frazier get a cameo in Rocky 1? Didn't he come out? So that would have been, I don't quite understand the reasoning behind that. That would have been really weird to have, him playing the real-life boxer and also a fictitious one of Clubber Lang. And apparently they just, they were doing a casting call, and I think it was the casting director saw, it's just here, America's Toughest Bouncer. And Mr. T won that competition, whatever that was, on NBC, gave him a call, and he's in the Rocky film. And honestly, you can't imagine anyone else in that role for me. He is, and the catchphrases as well, like pity the fool and everything. I always thought that was part of A-Team, and then it all started from this. So many of his catchphrases, the look, it's the medallions, it's the mohawk, it's really everything that we associate with Mr. T in the A-Team. Was it B.A. Baracus, isn't it? I think the name of the character in that. Everyone just calls him Mr. T, and he became a household name from this. He is amazing. He's one of my favorite characters out of the Rocky films to quote. We're going to go into favorite moments later, but if I'm just going to throw out one here, I think it's one of your favorite moments as well. It's where Rocky's announcing his retirement at the statue, at the steps, and then he's calling him out. And, Rocky's having none of it. He doesn't want to fight him until Clubber Lang starts making on his missus. Hey, woman, why don't you show your real man? And then that is what starts. And then he just goes for him. Absolutely love it. It's so fun to quote. What's your prediction for the fight? Prediction, pain. There's so many great catchphrases. It's all those 80s one-liners. He's perfect in this. Even the noises. I love when he wins the first match and he's there just he's amazing. He's easily one of my favorite characters across the Rocky franchise.
Yeah, I just can't remember him being so likable when I watched it before, and that's what's really hit me. And it is incredible. Just as someone that's always been a wrestling fan, those promos were everything. There's a reason why I prefer The Rock over many other people, because he could just talk absolute shites. And that was what you wanted to hear. You wanted to hear them doing a promo. And, you happen to UFC, boxing, you obviously get a little bit of it. You get Tyson Fury occasionally saying stuff, but it's not what it was. But that feels like here's a wrestling character in a boxing situation, and he is just incredible. There's not one line you'd not want to hear him say again. Everything he says is excellent. Everything he does is excellent. He ultimately kills. I've said this the other day. He kills Mickey. He's responsible.
He contributes. For it. He definitely contributes to it, I think.
And it's just insane. And it's the first time you see him and he's sat in that crowd. He's got the earrings in, and you just felt like, okay, that's how you're going to do a great villain review. You're going to build him up over a montage, and they do. And it's those moments of Mick where Mick's just kind of sat there, and he's obviously calling out Balboa. He wants him. And again, it's so wrestling, going to a public event to ruin. There's a really bad obviously, if you don't know wrestling, it's scripted. Sorry to break it to people that think it's real. There's one of the most insane Attitude Era 90s moments is someone's father's died. It happened in real life. He gave him permission to basically turn to a storyline. And basically at this fake funeral, a wrestler turned up and just starts a fight, and he attaches the casket to a car and drives off. It's so ridiculous, it's so over the top, and it's one of the most iconic scenes in history. And that is all I could think of with Clubline. Like, here's this really nice retirement speech, here's this incredible statue that obviously is the statue, it is at Philadelphia now, it's a big tourist thing, and here is like, hey woman, like, it's just it's absolutely amazing. It's what I'm here for. You know, we've had Apollo Creed, we've had a sophisticated world champion. Let's bring in someone that is meant to be despicable, that doesn't play by the rules, that's not just this, you know, even his background like Chicago. If you think of places in America where you'd have that background of they've had it tough on the streets, Chicago's one of probably the top 5. So everything about him was just excellent.
And you mentioned Apollo Creed there. Some of my favorite Clubber Lang moments are the moments where he's throwing shade at Apollo Creed.
Yeah.
And I think it's where I think it's Apollo Creed's first appearance in the film, where he comes into the ring just to say, you know, hi to everyone, congratulate the fighters, and he's just giving him shit, and he's just like, turn your back on me, Creed, or something. Doesn't he shove him in like at the end of the fight or something like that? Oh, it's brilliant. I love those moments, and it's just the looks that Carl Weathers gives him as well. Like, he doesn't say anything, he doesn't bite back, he just kind of stares him out. I love that moment. I guess we should talk about Apollo Creed as well, because it's kind of a surprise that he comes back. You think that his story is told with Rocky 2, you know, he's no longer the champion. Carl Weathers has mentioned as well that this is actually his favorite Rocky film, with how it humanizes Apollo Creed. And we do really see that other side to him. He's not that, he still does have that showman quality, but we see a lot of fighters do this where when they, or sportsmen in general, when they end their careers as a sportsman, they will usually go into commentating or some form. They would still endorse it essentially, and that's the kind of side that we're seeing to Apollo Creed. And he's integral to this film. He is the one that has to get Rocky back in the game after the death of Mick. We'll talk about that in a moment. He is the one that gets him training. Now, we kind of mentioned this, and I think it is worth saying, the whole training in this, I will say this is definitely, this and 4, easily the most homoerotic Rocky films. There is the whole running montage, and it's great and it's fantastic, it's just brilliant. But when they're running on the beach, it's a very extreme reaction to winning a race, and you know, it's this sort of like slow-mo, glistening, muscle-bound guys like splashing around in the water and throwing water on each other. Pretty much it feels like fresh out of Top Gun, the volleyball match in that, playing with the boys. It was the 80s, you know, I just feel like it was the 80s. It was fine, it was acceptable. It's brilliant, it's nice, but it adds to that image, and it's just that sort of like guilty pleasure kind of movie. I just think it's worth mentioning, because there are some moments where I'm like, even the ending, you know, like there's a lot of sort of like knowing lines, and it's the way that Carl Weathers performs it. And Rocky, you know, it's like, when we're all done, Stallion, I want you to do me a favor. It's like, what favor? And you know, you want to ring the bell, ding ding. It feels like even the music at the end, you got sort of like this sort of like funk guitar, this low beat to it. It feels like you're watching a softcore porn in some moments. You just think that any moment, like, he's going to be like, all right, Stallion, get on your knees. Like, it's just, but it's great, and I love it, and I love that bond that they have. But it's just funny, like the image of it with this and what the 80s was at the time.
It's Carl Weathers is great, and as you said, it humanizes him, because the glancing moments, that great commentary line is when it's like, oh, you're here, you fought Rocky, and he's like, they're talking about something, he just has this great one line. It's like, well, if his punches didn't hit, I wouldn't be talking to you. Basically saying like Rocky retired him. And it's those subtle moments, but it's the ex-sportsman, it's what they do after they finish in the sport. And the moment, as you said, that Clubber Lang starts throwing shade at Apollo, okay, he's going to have a bigger role in this. And I love the fact that we have that backstory. You know, I'm so excited for Throw the Damn Towel, because that's been such an overused GIF for the last sort of 7-8 years when GIFs have been a thing. Now it's like we get to watch it properly again in context, but going through the series one by one, we get a bit of backstory about the trainer. Straight from the off, he likes Rocky. He's even back to Rocky 1. He respected him. He says, you need to pay attention to this guy. And it's that build-up across the films to learning more about them. And I think, ironically, this is the first time I've seen this since seeing Creed. That's given also a bit more backstory to Adonis's roots.
Mhm.
Granted, he didn't know his dad. I'm intrigued to see Creed in the future now because we've now got Apollo's youth. Obviously, Adonis was very different, illegitimate child and stuff like that. But I loved that whole the train, not just the montage, but the training, the different type of training. Like this is how a champion trains doing the pool. We're going to sort of exercise all your muscles. The complete different narrative compared to that chicken in the field, Mick pushing him hard. I think that's what's nice that Apollo didn't take over and just be another Mick. He was his own person, and you can imagine Apollo Creed actually training like that because. Go back to Rocky 2, he wasn't training in some awful gym. He was in this posh area, like not as nice as the Rocky 4 montage for how Drago changed in Russia, but he's got all this tech and it takes him back to his roots as well as taking Rocky back. And I thought that was a really good way to begin their friendship, I guess. They've got respect for each other in the first two, but it becomes a friendship and it's what it means to him as you go down the line. And I thought this film perfectly delivered on all of that. And again, just getting to know them and obviously moving into Paulie so quickly. I wouldn't be able to say some of those lines in 2020. I mean, they're still bad back then. Still bad back then. But it's just that amazing. Like Paulie's likable but detestable, and he's got the weird alcoholic scene at the start. He's got these weird moments, and he's someone that's had a horrible life, and he'd probably be a Trump supporter if he could. And it's just that moment where like he just looks around Apollo's gym. He's like, I don't like it here, and you think it'd be a passing comment, and so he's like, why didn't you like them? And like it's funny because to be fair to Stallone, like he's wrote and directed this. Like he wants Paulie to be called out as a racist, and it makes Rocky look good again, I guess, from a sort of down the line 30, 40 years later comment that Rocky is sort of advocating racism already back then, which is great. But it was just a really, I'm not saying it's funny because it's racist, not funny, but it's the way Paulie how uncomfortable Paulie is just funny. And it's kind of really bad that it's like probably worse than it is now than it was in the 80s too.
But he's still likable. This is the thing. Like
that's what I always say. Yeah,
and Rocky's like that as well. Like he does butt heads a lot with Paulie, but he is still family, and he's just kind of a bit of an idiot, really. But he's a lovable idiot. He's a very small-minded guy, probably from a small-minded community as well. And that probably a lot of them are like that. I love that exchange as well, where he says, I don't like them. He goes, well, maybe they don't like you either. He's like, what have I done to them? He's just like, I thought I was punchy. And that just shows his stupidity in that moment. There's other little bits as well in the montages. I love the bit where Rocky's swimming in the pool and he grabs him and drags him into the pool as well. Just little moments like that. There's even a moment, and I actually missed this, but I remember that it is from this film. During the ending fight, doesn't Rocky like spit into a bucket and he misses? And it goes on Paulie. That actually happened. That was like they just left it in the movie, so his reaction in that moment is genuine. That would be bloody horrible if that happened to me. A bit of a germaphobe with stuff like that, personally. But a big scene that we need to talk about. You talked about that shift where Apollo becomes the mentor and the friend and everything, because we do say goodbye to one of the core cast of this with Burgess Meredith's passing in the film, with the death of Mickey. Contributed by Clubber Lang. I never thought of it that way, but yes, I guess it is. Although we do see the signs of it at the beginning, don't we? In the Thunderlips match, Burgess Meredith probably thought, "I'm going to get out of this franchise because it's got too ridiculous." He's fighting Hulk Hogan in the ring. Like this is my cue to get out of here. And it is a sad scene, and this is what I mean. Like a lot of people say, this isn't as ridiculous as 4, but it is. Tending to where that is eventually going to go. We still do get the death of Apollo Creed in the next film, so there are still moments of heart to it, but this one is like something fresh out of like the first two, in my opinion. I think they handle the death very well. I love the moment where Mick does die in that performance that Stallone gives. Now, I did talk about this. For the longest time, I thought it was funny. Like when I hear Stallone cry, I thought it was sad now, and it is sad, and it is a good performance, but there's something just funny when I hear Stallone crying. And I kind of have this a little bit in First Blood as well. And I know that you haven't seen that, so I don't want to give too much away, but there is a moment where he does cry and he does kind of let all the emotions come out. And it's very much that same kind of sobbing voice that Stallone has. That's just part of him, but it is a very emotional scene. And I think it was probably necessary for this film. So this is why I can't come down on this film where people say, it's completely irredeemable. I don't even know if people say that, if it's irredeemable, if it's nothing like the first two, if it's not as good. I think it's sitting at around like a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that should dictate what everyone thinks about films. But there is that drop, I think, and that change of tone. And whilst there definitely is a tonal change. It still does have scenes like this. It knows where its heart's at. It remembers to have moments such as the death of Mickey. It knows to have moments with Apollo Creed and scenes with Adrian and that good sort of like heart-to-heart moments. So it keeps its grounding, I think. It tends towards the ridiculous right from the off, actually, with Thunderlips, which I think we will get onto in a moment. But I think it's a nice scene. I think it's done well. I think it's done tastefully.
Yeah, mixed passings with in that Hogan fight, it stands out too much. Like to get to Rocky 4, you can't just have Rocky 2 then Rocky 4 in terms of story, but also ridiculousness. You need to have a bit of drama, move away from it, and push you into this new thing they want to do. It's kind of like Fast and Furious about the steroids. This naturally did it. Fast and Furious just did it. I think that's a really good comparison. And mixed passing is a weird one because it's before the fight, it's the push and shove. They tease it, and you got these great scenes with him when he's talking on the bed about the retirement. You get those scenes that would be great for Mick, and when it's the Hogan fight, he looks so out of character just being there. And it's like Rocky's got his obviously core of people, his trainers and everything, and he doesn't suit that lavish lifestyle. I know that sounds horrible. He's still got the old gym. He's still got all of this, which is great because of course he'd have that. But where Rocky is in Rocky's life, I think politely, but he's outgrown Mick. So I think you couldn't have took Rocky forward to where they put him without mixed passing in this film. I think it's really polite. And I thought the scene was handled. You mentioned the emotion. That's what I wanted to bring up. You look at Creed and you look at Rocky Balboa when he's visiting the graves of Adrian and Paulie, and you feel more emotion in that because you've not seen it, not because it's happened off screen, but it's the way that Rocky's just talking to them. And it's very different because he's watching someone pass versus obviously like mourning them years later. But it feels because I love Stallone. It makes me sound really bad criticizing him because it is funny, as you said, because of whether it's the accent, how we've seen him as Rocky for years, how we've seen him in modern day, how he's been over the years. It's really tricky to get that emotion with it. Like it feels very emotionless because of the reaction, and I think that's already good into people talking about near Rocky Balboa that there was an option to have Adrian's death be nearer the start of the film and have him mourning in the passing, and the horror shock of her already passed made his performance better in that. Granted, we're sort of 3 films behind, and I wonder if it's fine in Rocky 4 with Apollo. We'll get to that next week as well, but something just didn't work with Mick's death. I don't know why, but I was never emotionally on that level where I think I should have been, especially going back a little bit older when you've been through life a bit more, seeing them episodically, you think you'd be more attached to it, but it was completely less. And maybe that's because I know where the franchise is moving to, who knows, but there was something off about it. I don't know if it was Stallone or it felt so rushed, and then it feels like it's done so quickly as well. That you have the funeral, and then it's like, here's Apollo Creed.
Maybe it's because they just kind of throw you with the heart thing. I know that 3 years passed and a lot can happen, especially, an older gentleman that Mickey's character is, that, it is kind of just, I'll throw this as like a plot point. We get it once and then all of a sudden we get the payoff. It is kind of that end of Act 1 crux moment, though, I think. And I do think it needs to be in this film because if you kept Mickey alive, then, you'd go from like film to film and what is his role? What is he doing? He's basically doing the same thing. You get another fighter. You can't beat him, Rock. You got to train like this. And then you basically just rinse, repeat every single film. So I can see why they got rid of him. But Hennick mentioned this. He's pulled up one of the facts, which, and this did kind of strike me as well watching it again. The fact that we find out that Mickey's Jewish, in the it's a Jewish funeral at the very end, because in the first 2 movies it's hinted that he's Irish American, and apparently this was done to pay tribute to Jewish Americans who had become successful trainers throughout boxing history. I wasn't aware of that. I did not know that was the reason why. I thought that's kind of a nice tribute then he's paid in the film, and it's not like overstated or anything. It's just like a key little detail in there. I don't know. I think it's a nice scene. I think it's handled well. I think it's maybe not the placement of it. I think because it's set up from previous films or anything, maybe the reaction as well. And I think that Rocky 4 also suffers from that as well with the death of Apollo Creed. I've never sort of like been emotionally attached to that death, and I'll talk about that next week. But I do think you've had the Creed films which have gone back to that and kind of expanded it out more and gone back into that lore, almost like Rocky lore with Adonis and his history to it. We even learn from those Creed films the result of the final fight from this film. You know, we go back to Rocky 3 even with those. So I know we're not going to talk about the Creed films, but I do think it's worth, you know, throwing comparison in. We'll get to them eventually. When Creed 3 comes out, we'll talk with the Creed films. Let's talk Thunderlips then, because he's one of the main characters that we haven't talked about this. I mean, this, we should have opened with this, really. This is like the moment where you go, oh, this is a different film. It's great. I love it. I wouldn't remove it from the film. It has its place there. And what I'm trying to think of the other aliases that Thunderlips has as a character. It's like the ultimate. Let me try and find this. If you want to talk about Thunderlips for a minute, I'm going to try and find out what else they call him.
Yeah, it's Thunderlips is interesting because when I first watched this years ago, obviously I knew who Hulk Hogan was. Granted, my era didn't watch Hulk Hogan live. We saw bits of him when he was older, but it's always funny going back to him because he was obviously a massive name in the 80s, but he still wasn't at the level he became in the late 80s, which is as insane. Like, he was the face of WWE, but for Stallone to... what makes everything fun is it's for charity. It reminds me of, like, not really a nerd in comparison, but nerd is like, I want an aeroplane, I'm going to blow it up and I'll write a scene around it. And it's ultimately not an important scene. It is, but it's not. Stone's like, okay, I'm going to fight Hulk Hogan in this film. And this is why? Well, it's going to be a charity match, so I can. That's how I felt that script writing went. And it's incredible, and it worked, and I loved it because I despise Hulk Hogan as a human being.
Yeah.
I've always hated him. Before all the stuff you might have seen in the news last week, he's always been a horrible person. But
as a showman, though, as a wrestler, as a showman,
what I'm saying, as a showman, like, if you're going to put anyone, you know, me and you, we have Macho Man Randy Savage as our Spider-Man go-to, which is far better than Thunderlips. Maybe in Ultimate World, there's been Thunderlips versus Bonesaw, a crossover we never thought we'd see. But, you know, it's the fact he's the Giant. And so Henok mentioned Andre the Giant in the comment earlier, that he saw a match with Andre the Giant Hulk Hogan and wanted him. And I just kind of sat there like, it makes sense that Rocky would try and fight him. And to be fair, at least it wasn't this horrible build-up and him getting sort of knocked out by Rocky in a punch. The thing that actually made me like the scene a lot more was that he turned off the kayfabe to the turn where he went from, like, showman to real in front of the crowd, which makes me laugh because it doesn't happen. But everything I loved about that was the build-up of, like, Mickey taking the mick, Adrian screaming, the kid, like, getting, like, his dad okay, and everything, like, Paulie's reaction, everything building up Hogan was so good. And I'll actually give Hogan credit for this. Normally he wouldn't put his ego before something, but to allow being called Thunderlips, not be Hulk Hogan inside this,
that's huge.
I've got mad respect for that, because it surprises me that it wasn't Hulk Hogan. You think Vince McMahon would have shoved that in there, but I guess by being Thunderlips, he's allowed to lose, because he wouldn't have been able to lose if he was Hogan. So I thought it was great, and I just love that moment. I'm like, can we just get the Polaroid? And, like, he's really nice and friendly, and I love the stuff
personality
like
change at the end. Yeah. And I love Paulie's line as well. You talked about the build-up. That's one of my favorite lines in the film, where he goes like, "Why are they carrying him?" And then Mick's like, "He's walking." It's everything. The catch me when he throws him out the ring. It's the perfect start to the film. It's ridiculous. I found it. So there's Thunderlips, the ultimate male and the ultimate object of desire. Apparently, there was a novelization of Rocky 3, and they named the women he's with. Oh god, I can't find it now. I found that earlier, but they're all given, like, they all begin with D. Apparently, there's, like, I don't know, like Deirdre, Doris, and something else. I can't remember, but it's brilliant. He's a part of the Rocky lore, and we love Thunderlips.
Yeah, and you know what? This is what makes the Rocky lore. Like, don't get me wrong, we love the boxing, but if you just had Club Lang for this film, if you just had Apollo Creed for the first two, just Drago for the fourth one, by being able to throw up, like, here's a really random, like, Hulk Hogan it's not even a cameo, is it? It's a role, and it just adds to that element of Rocky. And, like, when it's all said and done, it's like Rocky raises $75,000 for charity or whatever the figure was, and I loved it. And I loved how, like, the crowd were all booing Hogan, they were all cheering Rocky. It was so wrestling. It was great to have it. You know, the fact he took off the boxing, that he had to take the gloves off to punch him, it was just incredible.
He's like really throwing the ref around as well. That's one of my favorite bits. Doesn't he, like, punch the ref or knock him out or something like that? It is like those. It is going back to, like, those classic WWF matches that I used to watch. When wrestling was great. I used to love wrestling as well, and then dropped off it as I sort of got older with it. But Yeah, we've talked about Eye of the Tiger, the music, Bill Conti again returning to do the score. That changes next week. We have a different composer for next week, although he does use some of the same themes. It's great as usual. I think this is my favorite variation on the opening Rocky fanfare as the film begins. It's mostly the same themes that we've heard from the previous two. There's a beautiful piano piece that plays over Mickey's death, and I think the beach conversation between Adrian and Rocky. It's everything it needs to be. And if I'm going to give my final thoughts on the film, because I think I've pretty much said everything I can on Rocky 3, I love it. It is a completely different animal to the first two. And you know what? That's fine. This new identity that it took on for itself, I think if you didn't have this, I don't think the Rocky franchise would be as it is now and as highly regarded. I don't know if this was the most successful one. I'd probably have to check that, and especially but I know that it made an absolute killing. This was meant to be the final Rocky film. They probably thought that with every subsequent Rocky film, and then they kept making money. I know for definite Rocky 5 was meant to be the last one, and that's why we got such a long wait between that one and Balboa. I'm glad they continued, because if they didn't, we wouldn't have the Rocky film that we're reviewing next week, Rocky 4, which I think is easily our favorite one. It's going to be brilliant to talk about that. I love Rocky 3. It's established the classic sort of villain now of Rocky. It still has its heart in the right place. We still do get some very nice scenes where the film slows down. It allows characters to breathe. We get new side characters introduced in this one, but it continues the story of the side characters that we love. And at this point, 3 films in, we just love seeing these characters together. We love seeing Rocky and Adrian together. We love Paulie being an idiot. I think now he kind of established himself as that comic relief character, certainly in the next few, and a different side to Apollo Creed. So this film did do some new things. It definitely has shifted focus to be more focused on the boxing and beating the bad guy. But it's Stallone being brilliant. It's still the Rocky films, and Eye of the Tiger. This just elevates this. And it's still one of my favorites to watch. At 95 minutes, it's an easy sit, and it's just a really entertaining film.
Yeah, my final thoughts kind of echo a lot of that. It's the funnest one. I'm going to go off the 3 we've been watching. It's the funnest one. You don't need to watch. You can't watch Rocky 2 without watching Rocky 1. You can't just chuck it on, because you'd end up wanting to watch Rocky 1 again because they're so similar. You can chuck 3 on, you can chuck 4 on, and you can have that conversation. But this allowed Rocky to be a franchise. You go back to that first, and it's a drama. How many dramas become trilogies? Like what, the before trilogy, that one? Not many. It's not really a thing, but you need that element to it to get the people wanting to go back to it. And it just does everything to establish Rocky as his own legend by having these tyrants, by having these overly cartoonish characters. They bring out the best of Stallone. I think he knows what he's doing all along. He's just writing to have fun. He's writing and directing this. He chooses what he wants his character to do. But to bring in those names, to make that impact, to take it away from, we've had these dramas, we're going to have a little bit of it. We're going to, Mickey's passing the handover from drama through to whatever it wants to be now. And they build off that, and they have fun with that. And it leaves it in a really good trajectory to build up to Rocky 4. So, yeah, on paper, it's not the best by a country mile. But in terms of favoritism, there is a case to be argued. And I guess we'll probably end up unofficially ranking them after we watch Balboa. But it's that whole, as we say many times with Star Wars, there's a humongous difference between what we know is the best and what is our favorite.
Sure. You have to, that's that separation, isn't it? You have to separate it in your head between what it's trying to be.
I see people argue, not Star Wars actually, film, saying how can your favorite film not be the best one you've ever seen? I was like, well, it just shows how stupid some people are. There's a reason it's favorite, and it may, in your opinion, of course, it's opinion. Of course, you might believe it's the best film ever made. I respect that, but you cannot sit there and say, "Schindler's List is my favorite film I've ever watched in my life," because if you take pleasure from that, you are in a bad place. So that's how I'm going to leave this Rocky 3 route ending. I'm joking.
On Schindler's List.
Overall, Rocky 3 it is so much fun, and if you're not invested by the end of this one, it's time to get out. But as you mentioned, box office, I had a look. This is the second highest grossing Rocky film of the entire franchise, including the 2 Creeds, and by 30 million. I won't reveal what's the number 1, but we'll get to discuss it next week.
Yeah, absolutely. There is one small point that I forgot to mention, but you know what? I may as well tack this on to next week's. The actual boxing, you mentioned cartoony. We're going to get into cartoony territory next week, but the sound effects of the shots would kill a man, and that started in this film. It only goes to 3 rounds. Rocky never blocks. He takes every punch, the trash talking, and that doubles down into next time. So we've done final thoughts already, but that is a point with this movie, but we'll talk about that next week when we get to the fighting. Rocky 4. It's the one that, since we started this, that's the one that we want to talk about the most. That is going to be an absolutely unmissable review discussion. I don't know how long we'll go on for Rocky 4, but we've got a lot to talk about, and it's even contemporary as well, because obviously it's getting a new director's cut. I think Stallone's working on it at the moment for the 35th anniversary, so that is going to be very interesting. So that will be next week, next Tuesday. As always, these retro reviews every single Tuesday at 10 p.m. And we'll be continuing the Rocky franchise strong. As always, let us know what you think of the Rocky franchise, specifically this one or any of them. Part of the pleasure of doing these is that we do get to have a discussion with you guys watching at home. You can tell us about some of these older films, your times with them and your favorite moments. Anything Rocky related, please do let us know. And if you'd like to stay tuned for and keep up to date with all of the other videos that we're doing, I know the rest of this week, even tomorrow, we'll go into that in a minute, with the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special Watch Along. That's going to be tomorrow at exactly the same time, 10 p.m. It's going to be very interesting. We haven't watched it. It's going to be a completely blind watch. It's, as you said at the beginning, it's going to be a reaction, a review, a watch along. It's going to be everything. We're just going to kick back, watch it. It's 45 minutes long. Should be a nice, easy watch. And if you've got Disney Plus at home, you'll be easily able to watch it with us. But if you want to stay updated with all of our other videos that we do as well, go onto our socials. So Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. And if you'd like to pick up any merch, go to the TeePublic link in the description down below. I can't remember who said it earlier. I think it was Carl says that we should do a Rocky themed shirt for Hennock, our resident Rocky fan. There we go. There's the comment. Maybe we throw some new designs on there. Who knows, as time goes by, you could pick one of those up. But this has been a blast tonight. Thank you to everyone in the comments who's commented along, and we'll see you next week for Rocky 4. Take care, everyone.